Let's talk about your what you've been through, your cancer.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a few like highlights that I retained from the episode your first episode of In My Vein. Is that the name of
my
your podcast?
Yeah.
Which is crazy, and I listened to it twice, and it made me two times emotional at the end, especially when you talked about Thomas. So you had cancer for 10 years, which is crazy, and you survived it, and you carried on working during the treatments. One treatment can cost up to $250,000,
mm-hmm.
which is crazy monies as well, with staggering. And all specialists are 100% sure that playing the trombone contributed to you surviving.
Yeah.
Which is like mind-blowing. And then, it took you 2.5 years to produce your own blood, and you had to have transfusions every 2 weeks.
Yeah. That was after the donor bone marrow transplant, where they take away your immune system completely and they give you your donor's immune system. And your blood type has got to change over to your donor's type. So I was originally O rhesus negative.
Mm-hmm.
And usually it takes weeks or maybe a month to swap over to your donor's type. Mm-hmm. My donor's type is A positive.
Yeah.
But for some reason, I couldn't produce any blood at all after the transplant. So, and all the specialists are just baffled. Don't know why I can't produce any blood. So they just keep having to top me up with blood every 2 weeks for 2.5 years. So even though I was cancer free by that point, finally, I was still tied to the hospital, and I was touring. I just started doing a tour in America, and red blood cells only last, I think it's just a matter of weeks before your body keeps producing them all the time.
Yeah.
So the fact that I couldn't produce any, they just depleted, and that's it, they're gone. And so I got to Chicago, did the east coast of America, got as far as Chicago, and I suddenly just couldn't walk. I couldn't breathe. The oxygen, it's amazing until you sort of experience having no red blood cells, or very, very low red blood cells. I think got down to about 5. You just can't move your legs. The oxygen you need, you just get really stiff. You just can't move because you need the oxygen to move all your limbs in your body, and you need to be able to breathe. So they flew me back to the UK, topped me right up again, and then flew me back out to join the tour again, finish the rest of America.
That's crazy again. Can you do a small summary of like a teaser of your episodes?
Yeah.
I don't want to replace it again.
Yeah, of course.
Because it's a great episode to explain briefly.
So I was just maybe 2 years out of graduating, and I had a lump in the left-hand side of my neck, which is where you hold the trombone. So the trombone is all the weight on the left-hand side of the your left arm takes all the weight of the trombone. So this lump on the left-hand side of my neck, just above my collarbone, just felt like, well, it's just muscles going wrong. So I went to see a physio, and the physio said, "Don't like the look of that. I'll send you to your GP." GP also said, "I don't like the look of that." Eventually, after lots and lots of tests, it came back, and it was Hodgkin's lymphoma. And the first test I then had to have was a full body CT scan to see if it spread anywhere. And unfortunately, it wasn't just in my neck, it was in between my lungs. It was 15 centimetres round in there, so really quite big in there.
It's massive.
And, and my first oncologist said chemotherapy starts on Tuesday. And I was like, hang on a minute, surely I've got a choice of like radiotherapy or some other that isn't, I'm not going to lose my hair like straight away.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, how about saving eggs as well? Because I'm like my early 20s, I might want to have kids. And he said, chemotherapy starts on Tuesday, see you on Tuesday. And it was like, okay, my life has changed dramatically straight away. So the first treatment, I think the success rate of getting to remission is so high, especially for someone in their 20s, really, really strong, healthy, otherwise healthy. I think it's like 98.99% chance of going to remission. Obviously, I was in the tiny percentage where I didn't get to remission from that treatment. And what I didn't know was after that 6 months of really, really horrible chemotherapy, feeling absolutely dreadful from those treatments, my prognosis then was skydiving. If that fails, then the next treatment isn't as successful. The treatment after that isn't as successful again. And I just kept going through treatment after treatment after treatment after treatment. That ABVD first chemotherapy failed. Then it was ESHAP chemotherapy that failed. And then BEAM chemotherapy that failed. A stem cell transplant from my own stem cells that failed. And then went through radiotherapy that failed. And once I'd finished, I think, those 5 treatments back to back, which was about 2 years, they then told me that we've run out of treatments. That's it. I'm afraid you need to get your head around the fact that you need to write your will and get your affairs in order. And I'm like, hang on, I'm just in my early 20s. This can't be real. This is just nonsense. And my oncologist actually sent me to psychologists to get my head around the fact that I was dying, because they were afraid that I'm not taking this seriously. And I was busy touring, like you said earlier. I was touring with Michael Bolton for 3 years, and I went on tour with Seal for 6 years throughout all of this.
How did you do this? Why did you want... you mentioned it during the episodes that you wanted to carry on because you didn't want to stop your life. Your life has to stop, and I think you did right, but obviously. The fact that you carried on working with cancer is crazy.
I remember one person saying to me when I was going through the first 6 months of chemo, he said, what, 6 months of chemo? And every other week you're doing chemo, and the weeks in between you're going on tour doing a West End show. I said, yeah. He said, well, I couldn't do that. 6 months of chemo, I would shut myself away in my lounge for 6 months and just concentrate on getting through that. And I said, well, I couldn't do that. I think shutting myself away and just thinking about that 24/7, that would kill me alone. I think I have so many people who have come to me over the years who've said, my mum's just been diagnosed, or my aunt, or my friend, or my dad, my brother have just been diagnosed. What can I do to help them? And the first thing I say is they just need an escape. Mm-hmm. They need normality, and they need an escape, because it is in there. It's in your head.
Yeah.
The moment when you wake up in the morning, there's always a split second for me when I go, right, where am I? am I at home? Am I in a hotel? Where am I? There's always a split second where you don't really know what day it is. You don't know you've got cancer in that split second. Yeah. And then when you're more conscious, it hits you again. Yeah. You're like, oh, I've got this cancer. And it's with you. It weighs down on you enough. If you can find some kind of escape, if it's watching a movie, which is 2 hours long, when you watch a movie, you just zone into that. Everything else doesn't exist. You go to the cinema, nothing else exists, because you're in that. You're so focused in that. And that is an escape. You've got to find that escape just to have a bit of relief from it. And that's what my work was for me.
But what I wonder as well is, how were you able to do that physically as well? Did you have to be on drugs or before the gigs? Or it's just because, obviously I've never been through chemo, but I've heard that it's really draining, and
some of it can be,
you lose so much energy. So I wonder how you've been able to go through this and go on tours and gigs, which is really energy demanding.
I mean, you lose a lot of weight. Yeah. You go really pale. You lose your hair. You lose a lot of energy. But it was doing that work that gave me the energy back. And gave me the inspiration to carry on. And it was the partner I was with at the time when I was going through that first 6 months of chemo. I'd have the chemo on the Tuesday, and the side effects would last until the Sunday evening. Okay. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you feel absolutely dreadful. Mm-hmm. But the following week, was a week without chemo, and that's the week I would go on tour.
Okay.
And so I'd be doing shows Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, 2 shows on Thursday, Friday night, and 2 shows on Saturday. Go home again on Sunday, ready for chemo on the Tuesday.
Okay.
And the start of that week, the Monday night show after the chemo week, was always like, oh, can I do this? Can I do this? But what I've got to do is sit in my chair and play the trombone. I don't really need to do anything else. And as long as I'm okay to do that for sort of 2 hours in the evening, I can get through it. It's going to be fine. And then I'll have a hotel. And so I could take it easy in between all the performances. But by the end of the week of the shows, like the Saturday 2 shows, I was as much energy as everyone else.
Yeah.
You go out for dinner in between the shows, maybe have a couple of drinks after the last show. And it lifted my spirits because people treated me like normal. They didn't treat me like this cancer patient. They didn't treat me as though I'd lost lots of weight. I looked really grey and I'd lost my hair. They just treated me like normal. So I felt normal. And so that gave me the inner courage. Right, let's go in for this chemo week again.
Yeah.
There were lots of sort of times when I had to be shut away in hospital. The bone marrow transplant, at the end, the donor transplant, I was in hospital in an isolated room, probably the size of this room, for about 6 weeks. And that's hard mentally, that you cannot go anywhere. You are stuck in that room for 6 weeks. But it all worked eventually. But it was clinical trials that I had to sign up to in the end because I exhausted every avenue of standard treatment. And the specialist said, well, we've run out of all these treatments that we give to people. There is nothing else unless you want to sign up to clinical trials, and we'll keep an eye out for anything if it gets invented, if it comes along. Yeah. So I said, yeah, of course, there's nothing else I can try. Then I either die or give this a go. So I'll sign up to anything you find. So the first clinical trial I went through, the specialist, there was no side effects at all. This was the first treatment where I didn't lose my hair. I didn't feel dreadful. There was just no side effects. I felt absolutely fine. It was just an infusion. And it's like normal. Hang on a minute. I'm meant to feel bad. Surely, no, not at all. That's the way medical research is going and clinical trials are going. And eventually, hopefully, all the standard treatments will be replaced by these treatments that are much more tailored to your specific cancer. It's not just Hodgkin's lymphoma. It's a certain protein that exists on the tumours that they can treat much more directly, that gives you more chance of remission and much less side effects. And this first clinical trial, my specialist looked at the results and said, okay, this has worked a little bit. And normally, if it's worked a little bit, it's just failed.
Yeah.
It's worked a little bit, it's failed. Because they want you to get to remission. But this specialist said, it has worked a little bit. And I was like, he's using this language that I've not heard before. He said, this is interesting because this is the way we've got to treat you. Unfortunately, there are no drugs to treat you, but this is the kind of thing we need. So fast forward another couple of years, I had regular scans to see how fast the tumours were growing. Another clinical trial came along where I was shut in a lead-lined room for 9 days and injected with this highly radioactive drug.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
I told about this in my podcast.
I don't want to spoil it too much, though.
I know. So, I mean, you've got to go and listen to that podcast because I talk all about it. But I also do speeches now for medical companies all around the world. This year I've been to Mexico, Romania, Miami, all over the place, just doing a speech about what I went through for medical companies, clinical trial companies, just to basically share that clinical trials need to carry on. And I speak to the people that work in the marketing departments, the packaging departments, that might feel like what they're doing isn't worth anything. But actually, I met the people who have actually put the dose that got me to remission into a box and put the label on it. I've met those people who are just in a room this size and a production line taking a box, putting treatment in it, putting a label on it, moving it to the next person. That is their job. But I've met those people, and I've been able to have, I don't know, not many cancer patients get to actually say thank you.
Yeah.
And I walked through the whole factory of where these drugs are made, and enormous warehouses. And then there's a whole section of placebos that are all boxed exactly the same as the actual drugs. So you go through a trial, of course, there's going to be some people that are going to be given the placebos, but it's got to be packaged exactly the same. It's got to look exactly the same.
Yeah, you can't be labelled placebo.
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously.
So I went through here, I was completely mind blown by going through this factory, meeting the people who packaged the drug that got me to remission, that saved my life. And I gave my speech to these people, and they've stayed in touch, which is amazing. And they sent me such amazing messages saying that I'm the first person they've met, a patient they've actually met that's been through something that they're producing. And they said, "You've given me the focus that I needed all these years." And I suddenly realised why I'm doing this as a job. And I said, "Yeah, you are saving lives. You might just feel like you're just putting a label on a box, but you're still contributing to saving someone's life."
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I want to stop here with the story because, again, I don't want to spoil
You
your
have to
episode.
go and listen to the first episode of my podcast, which is called
and
In My Veins.
I'll put a link in the descriptions of all the platforms.
Thank you.
One last question, and then I'll go to the final questions, more about venues and performing. Do you have a life insurance?
No, I don't think I do. Is that in terms of... I know pianists can insure their fingers, can't they?
I, as obviously in any jobs, you can have one. I started to have one because if you're ill or if you're injured and you can't do your job, then you need to still be able to make a living.
So, well, I did have some life insurance when I was ill, and my house got paid off because of that. And I'm actually talking to my financial advisor now to see, now I'm 12 years in remission, whether I'm entitled to take another policy out or not, because you've got to wait such a long time. You've got to wait a long time.
Yes.
I thought it was 10 years, but now I'm 12 years, maybe.
Another question I was going to ask you, and sprung to my mind this morning. Have you recovered your immune system? Is it working perfectly well now? Because you say during the episodes that you had to take it completely up to scratch. It was like a baby immune system. You had to take all the viruses you needed to build it up.
Yeah.
Is it okay now?
So post bone marrow transplant, I've now got I've got my donor's DNA and my donor's blood type. And in theory, I've got the same immune system as him. So the idea is you then got a better immune system than your original immune system. I think my specialists think because of all the back-to-back treatments that I had for about a decade, which is just poison after poison after poison, it has affected my production of antibodies, which is your immune system, basically. So I have to inject immunoglobulins, which is antibodies, once a week at home. Just comes in a little syringe and I just inject it into my tummy. It takes about 10, 20 minutes. And each of those syringes, which, it's not very big, and it's just a clear liquid, but that's come from 2,000 people's blood donations. And they take the antibodies out of people's blood donations and make this immunoglobulin. And the good thing about these injections as well is they're coming from people who have had COVID and then donated blood, or they've had the COVID vaccinations and then donated blood. So in these antibodies, I'm now getting some COVID antibodies as well. Great. So that is also helping keep me protected from COVID. And I've had 8 COVID vaccines now as well, which is quite a lot of vaccines. But the first 3 or 4 didn't even have any effect on me for some reason. Didn't.
That makes me want to. I'm going to sign up for to give my blood regularly now.
Donating blood is one of the most amazing things that anyone could do. The amount of times over the 2.5 years that I needed blood transfusions, and I'd turn up to hospital and have to wait for blood because the hospital has run out of blood. It's frightening, actually. And sometimes you see those motorbikes carrying blood from hospital to hospital.
Okay.
There's a shortage of every single type of blood. And if I'd known how important it was, I would have donated blood before I went through everything I went through. But now I'm obviously not allowed to because I went through a type of blood cancer. So my brother's now got a blood cancer. Cancer has been affected our whole family. My mum went through breast cancer 5 years ago. My dad sadly passed away of kidney cancer. My brother's now got blood cancer. And it's everywhere. It's 1 in every 2 people.
I'm very sorry.
You get cancer now. But donating blood and even being a bone marrow donor is so much easier than you think. When I interviewed my actual donor about what it was like to donate, he said he signed up to become a donor because there is recruitment procedure going on to get more donors, and he got half a day off work if he signed up. So that's why I did it. So he got half a day off work. And then when he donated, so the week leading up to the transplant, he had an injection every single day to boost his blood count. So he had loads and loads of cells to donate. And he said he felt a bit achy because of that, because that's his bone marrow working really, really hard. The inside of his bones are working really hard, producing all these cells. So that's why he felt a bit achy. And then from the moment he donated, the aches went away. And he donated, he had a needle in one arm, a needle in the other arm, and the blood whizzed out of one arm like he was donating blood. The machine took what it needed and everything else, gave it straight back. And that afternoon he went back to work. And that was it.
As simple as that.
Yeah.
But you never think about it.
No, most people think it's really painful, and no, that's the patient.
Exactly, yeah. I feel very guilty of not going so often.
But people don't know, and I think it's. I don't know how the donating the registers can actually get the message out there to say actually it's really simple, and you will save so many lives. And my donor still to this day says it's the best thing he's ever done, which is amazing. He's a complete stranger. Well, he was.